This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm David McDonald.
I'm Sam Merciers.
And I'm Nate Blyton.
And this week we are joined by composer Keith Lay. Keith lives in Orlando. He's a friend and colleague of mine at Full Sail University. He is one of the founders of the Central Florida Composers Forum, and he's got a really cool project coming up that we're hoping to talk to him about. Keith, thanks for being with us this morning.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
I've been wanting to have you on to talk about this project for a long time, but I want to start by talking about the project that led to this one. And this, a couple of years ago, a project of yours called Inspire, which is a really interesting example of a space-specific music, of a location-specific piece, and it took place at a really cool location here in downtown Orlando. So why don't you tell us about Inspire and what that is and how it came to be?
Okay. Inspire is the first of these distance music projects. The idea of the distance music came about when I was asked by the Orange County, the director of Orlando, that's called Orange County, had asked me about, hey, could you help us do something for the Creative City project? And he had the idea of carillons. He said, why don't you write some music for carillons? And I thought, well, do we really have carillons downtown? And there was one. And there were other ones that, as he looked into it, he got very into the researching carillon music, and he found out that Orlando had a lot of automated carillons, but only one actually playable carillon. But they did also have a bell, a one real bell that would play the note C. So we listened, went down for lunch, and we were downtown, all the traffic buzzing by at the Orange County building, and he there was one of the carillons he was discussing. We were researching across the street. And we met just to hear it, and doing its normal daily routine, and we couldn't hear it, even from across the street. There's so much traffic.
Oh no!
So but he got me the wheels rolling, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we put, even if it was just a church congregation, to step outside, hear the carillon, and put a couple trumpet players on the roof in the spire, right in spire. Of the church. And then I thought, well, why would we do that? Because there's a lot of churches. Well, let's put trumpet players in all the church steeples and have their whatever they have bang around, clang around, and maybe we could add some choirs. Anyways, things started rolling, and it developed into this realization that, well, obviously, if you're like a block away, nothing's going to line up. You're not going to hear anything quite working between these churches. But I thought, well, sometimes that's how we get a light bulb going off and understanding, well, I could use this to my advantage. Why don't I choose a lot of remote locations around a center point, and all I need to do is simple math and the speed of sound to determine how long it's going to take those sound waves to arrive at the audience. And then, since everyone's going to be running music notation, standard music, if I can give them a click all at the same time, and let's say we're running at 120 beats per minute. Well, 120 beats per minute is a beat every half second, right?
Sure.
So if I knew that right, you guys catch that, and I'm sure the audience.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to subdivide that into 16th notes, right? So all of a sudden, the 16th note is 125 milliseconds. Now we're into the realm of of not being too far off. If my musicians can stay with a 125 millisecond accuracy, it'll be blurry, but depending on where everyone is around the city, I could have them all sync together.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing about music, is how precise we perceive time in the context of music. I feel like most of the time when we perceive time, a difference of, a hundredth of a second is for practical purposes in most of our life not a difference.
Yeah.
But in music, it's huge. right? If you're
Yeah.
dealing with a computer
Yeah.
thing that's got a 100 millisecond delay, that's a big problem if you need it to be instantaneous.
Right.
You are so right. It is a really good recognition to understand how fine-tuned musicians are.
So,
Really.
so what did you do then with that realization that you could play with that that time that time difference that you create by being so far apart?
Well, there would be one, the most obvious, let's say, fundamental principle would have the sound waves meet at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and that would just simply be dividing the distance. And the distances are very easy to find on Google Maps, Google Earth rather. There's a ruler on Google Earth, and I use it all the time now. And then guessing the building height, which is not that hard with some trigonometry to figure out what the tops of the buildings will be in feet. You can figure out how far it is to the point, right? So then it's 1128. That number divided by 1128, and that's how many milliseconds it is, and then you divide. Then it's really easy to figure out musically what that'll be, right? So the most fundamental one is to have them all come at the same time, right? So that of course you would use when you want a big unison or a big tutti.
Mm-hmm.
But what was more interesting was placing the audience in the center of a circle of sound, of points of sound. There were 12, and 10 of those were actually human. One was a bell, which was human. My son rang the bell, and then a carillon, which was played by the keyboard. But these other places were all around. I used 2 swan boats and 8 building tops. Only one was a church. And the coolest surround effects could come from that. So if I wanted the sound to start at any point and rotate around the audience in counterclockwise or clockwise, it was simply a matter of just planning it. It was really fun.
So it's a really interesting thing, and I'm curious how much experimentation you got to do before the performance and what that led to. It seems like it's a huge undertaking to get all those people coordinated at the thing. How do you rehearse something like that?
Well, you don't. I was looking forward to it. It's like, this is going to be cool. Whatever happens. I mean, how many times do you get to hear music across distance like that, especially reverberating around buildings? It's a really wonderful sonic experience,
Yeah.
So I knew it would be. It may not be hang together tightly musically, but it would definitely be a sound that I'd never heard before.
That's for sure.
To hear a football field marching band across distance, but it would be an entirely different one to make the antiphony. To think of St. Mark's Cathedral in Gabriele, except like times 100. Like that piece was, gosh, I never really figured out how many acres, but it was really covering, probably 30, 40 acres.
Oh yeah.
The sound, the antiphony worked much better than I thought. Now I had to make some concessions. One of the concessions was that if I really wanted to get down with this, moving these pieces around in all these different places, and really take advantage of this surround sound counterpoint, if you will, this huge antiphony thing.
Mm-hmm. So if you're watching
I
the
would have to make
YouTube
the
video, you can see I've got the Google map dialed up of the park that we're talking about. This big lake in the middle has swan boats that you can rent out and paddle around the lake.
Right.
And then all around here there are these giant buildings, 20-story buildings surrounding at least one side of this lake. And in between the buildings and the lake is a nice little kind of green park space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful park, actually.
Yeah.
And being downtown has its advantages too. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so you're looking at right at where the piece was performed at, that plaza.
Cool.
That's the Disney bandshell on the right. And then if we can see that again, actually I have to stop talking for us to see that picture. Is that right, David?
Oh no, you can. I think I've got it locked on the locked on the map picture
Oh,
thing.
okay. I'm all right. So I had people on that tall building in the middle. I couldn't put people on the top of that. I put them on the swimming level, which is
Oh,
about 4 floors up. It wasn't
okay.
very high, but I put two tubas and two French horns there.
Nice.
And if you move to the left,
Oh, there's a bunch of trees.
oh, all right, yeah. Let's see. You were looking at the view, and if you rotate, I can't see the image.
Oh, that's
Okay.
all right.
All right. Yeah, there's the view, and yeah,
Move
if you
around here
move,
a
there
little
we
bit.
go. See
There we
that tall
go.
building to the left? I
Yeah.
had people on the top of that one.
Nice.
A French horn, two trumpets, and a trombone up there. That's about 28 stories up.
And then the others were out here on this lake.
Well, there were two swan boats out there, but if you keep rotating the same direction, keep going to the right, I guess, you'd see there were three. There were five more buildings actually involved.
Oh,
So
wow.
Wow.
the
That way.
and so if you, it's documented in a video that you can find on my website. You can see the whole thing and hear it, and there's a little bit of the math in there, and you can just see what it was.
Hmm.
But the piece was a lot of fun, and the musicians, of course, had a ball going up to the tops of buildings because it was a little bit odd of a space, right? And
How was the buy-in for all of the people involved? How did the musicians feel about it? How did the people in the space that were giving up their balcony to this crazy composerly project?
well, well, one building, in fact, it was the view. We didn't really have permission. We had to sneak up there, and that was like guerrilla music, you know.
Guerrilla distance music.
Yeah, guerrilla distance music, especially when you're carrying tubas and stuff. It's hard to get away with just sneaking up there, you know.
I think the
Right.
Germans have an expression for that. They just kind of ram it all. Guerrilla distance music
Yeah, right.
with a K.
No, it's one word that means guerrilla distance music taking place near a lake.
Right.
They have a word that means
Well, you know,
Guerrilla distance music Loch Scheisse.
Exactly.
it, it's really interesting to me that I'm reading your big write-up about the whole thing with diagrams and everything. It's very interesting and sort of hurts my brain thinking about trying to plan music, and then I think I want this ensemble to play and they're this distance, so they'll have to come in, blah blah blah. Obviously that's all the stuff you were thinking about. So here's quoting from your website. About a week before the premiere, the station positions for Inspire were finalized so I could finally begin composing the work, which seems strange, but it seems like the big part of the work was, like, I guess, getting the ensemble together, you would
Right.
call it, because that's determining the sweet spot and all the locations and all of that stuff. So all of that planning, it's a little more in-depth than making sure you know what the range of an oboe is, before you start writing.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
you-
it's the equivalent though of the range of the oboe, though, right? Is
Right.
knowing what the rhythmic offset is for the people in this building compared to the people over here. So
Exactly.
what did you learn from mounting this work, Keith, that you're using in this new project?
well, I guess some things you never learn. I'm still trying another one. The idea of not getting everything finalized until the last minute. Is this one is a little bit more of that flavor. I can't touch it until I get everything finalized.
Right.
Um,
How
and
do
that's
you?
okay.
what-
But so in other words, the composition is as much the idea of the work as it is the actual composition.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is something that went on mid-20th century quite a bit, and people were, it's almost like who came up with the coolest idea that nobody had come up with yet, in sort of the experimental music vein. And this, to me, is like a cool new way that I haven't seen anybody do, at least yet, grab hold of that kind of idea of experimentation where the idea is part and parcel with the actual composition itself. So kudos, because I don't think anybody else is doing stuff
Yeah, I don't
as
know.
cool as this.
The Charles Ives and from the Steeples and all those pieces where you actually had things. Obviously it had to be random, and we love that randomness of a lot of bells ringing through a city. We have. obviously the old antiphonal stuff from the Renaissance, and gorgeous. Love to hear that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I'm a real fan of 5.1 surround. I do a lot of other composing with orchestras and stuff using electronics and surround,
Cool.
and I do a lot of recording in surround and binaural, or not binaural, B format stuff. And so you get attuned to these sounds, but there's definitely something that I love about it. So a lot of these pieces are really out of curiosity more than anything.
It's interesting that you're using the surround and the distance rhythmically, because I think I have heard pieces that use distance and space in different ways, but I feel like they usually punt on the problem of rhythm. They'll have an offstage performer, but the offstage performer is playing this kind of fluid rubato thing that doesn't require them to be coordinated with anybody that's on stage or anybody that's anywhere else. And we've talked on the show before about Phil Klein's On Silent Night for a bunch of people carrying boom boxes around, and it's kind of an ethereal, ambient kind of electronic piece where everybody starts at not exactly the same time, but kind of more or less the same time, and walks all together, and it progresses through a series of sections together, but there's not any point where the parts have to be really precisely coordinated. And I think that's what, to me, is so interesting about Inspire and this new distance music project, is that you've taken on the challenge of figuring out the rhythmic thing to make the distance much more meaningful and precise.
Right,
which is
precision. Right,
very cool.
So, using you've seen them. They're little walkie-talkies. They have about 2 mile range. They're about as large as your hand, and it's just a two-way UHF radio. That's how I sent a clip to the Inspire musicians, and I'm going to be using that again in distance music.
Neat.
Before we moved to distance music, there was one other thing that a composer will have to, as a composer, I had to wrestle with. I needed to make the music simple enough to be learnable immediately.
Yeah.
Right? So that limited my antiphonal tricks, and I went a little light on it, and I decided that was one of the things that I made a mistake. I needed to go ahead and ask my musicians to do better. The other part was the musicians were mostly doing it for gas money. I offered them $25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of friends from the orchestra and people that knew me, but that wasn't enough people. I needed 22 brass musicians, so it went out. A lot of people ended up doing it for free, but a lot of those guys were, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know how good they would be.
Yeah.
So I couldn't make it terribly hard to read. And the biggest part for composers was my audience. My audience was Joe Public. And I wanted it to be an inspiring piece. I wanted it to be uplifting. So it's a little Disney-fied. I do a lot of commercial music, and it was more commercial than it was maybe something I'd want to put on necessarily on the radio. I mean, I like the music a lot, but when you're creating music that has that you want to reach a basic audience, the music. I wasn't going to be giving them a lot of complex harmonies.
Well, it seems to me that everything else in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just the idea of writing mainstream, and I think all of us can find in our heart lots of ways to write great, just 3-chord rock and roll songs if you want. I mean, the music comes in all forms and sizes, but it's a little soft on as far as the music itself being new. But what makes it really interesting, of course, is the spatial dimension, timing dimension.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're demanding enough of the listener, and it's a complex enough aesthetic experience that, I mean, I would have done it the same way. You got to give the potential listener something to try and start collating together in their brain. And if, I doubt they're going to go, oh, listen, the trombones on that rooftop and the trombones over on that rooftop are playing two pitch class sets that have a strong Z relationship. I don't think anybody was going to do that,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what's the old Bob Dylan saying? He said that, when someone asks him why he doesn't use more than 2 chords in a song, and he says, oh, you can't give people that much lyric and that much song. You got to do one or the other, otherwise it can be confusing. You know,
Right.
and I think he's right. I think that we do have to be careful about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the interesting thing about your new project, to me, is that it's certainly the Inspire had some sort of, you were instructing the listener to go to the quote sweet spot, whereas this one you're inviting the listener to walk around in a space so that by definition what they're going to be experiencing is going to have emergent qualities that unfold as they move around the space.
Right. Yeah, you got it perfectly. I almost call this parallax music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
that's a good name for it.
Yeah.
That's a good name for our crowd. It's not a good name.
That's true.
Yeah, everybody was
You could have
polishing their...
Could have also called it dangerously loud music.
Actually, it's going to run between 83 and 93 decibels.
Okay, so it's just right on the edge.
It's not terrible.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right around the rockland.
So why don't you tell people about, or would you rather us play this intro video that you have for the Kickstarter project?
That's a good place to start, the video.
Okay, so this is Keith has a Kickstarter for this, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well, and this is the video for that project. We'll have a link to this and all of Keith's other stuff in our show notes at SoundNotion.tv when the show goes up. But this is Keith's intro video to Distance Music on Kickstarter.
Hi, I'm Keith Lay, and I want to tell you about Distance Music. It's going to be taking place October 25th here at beautiful Orlando, Florida at Lake Eola Park. This video is made to tell you what it's about and how it works, because knowing how it works is half the fun.
The term distance music is my name for a new approach to musical experience where the composer takes advantage of timing delays in large-scale outdoor sound environments. The concept evolved out of my previous work, Inspire, for 22 brass musicians, Steeple Bell, and Carillon performed in downtown Orlando. Inspire gave the audience a brand new experience of music that cannot be heard indoors. Like Inspire, the audience in this new work will hear sounds that fill the sky from every direction, blending with the birds, wind, traffic, and people of the city. The audience will be asked to walk around the park's 9/10 mile path. On the lake, 7 train horns, each upon a different boat located at a precise position, will speak their short, clear note.
This piece is going to cover 45 acres. So think of it as a 45-acre concert hall. I needed that much area to give me enough distance so that there was enough time delays between them to create melodies. That's why I chose train horns, because train horns are the loudest musical instrument made. And at the same time, we're going to be hearing a brass choir from 2 points. One of the brass choirs is going to be located on this side of the lake on top of a building, and another one across the lake on top of a building, pulling together a musical harmony with the horn melodies. So what I decided to do is place all 7 horns on concentric circles all the way across Lake Eola in 2 big arcs. This first arc is on the west side of the lake. And I'm going to have a horn at 280 feet, and then 140 feet beyond that one, and then 140 feet beyond that one, and then all the way back at a total of 560 feet on the other side of this little island here.
If the horns should play all at the same moment, the audience would not hear them that way. Rather, they would hear a melody that would start with the note from the nearest train horn, followed by the second nearest, and so on until the furthest horn is heard.
As the audience moves away from this spot, that rhythm, that syncopated rhythm is going to dissolve and fall apart, and the horns are going to be heard in a different order, because as the audience walks around this path, they're going to change their distance between every horn. So there's a lot of fun, a lot of exploration, and everything that you do and every place that you are will be your very own. It's something that cannot be recorded, only experienced.
So that's such a cool intro video that I can't imagine that anybody's going to see that and not immediately decide that it's worth their contribution. And you clearly put a lot of effort into it. I would imagine that some of that stuff that you were doing to make that video work are similar things that you might have been doing to kind of just figure out exactly what it's going to sound like to have these different pitches happening at different times. I'm curious where the train horn idea came from. I've heard you talk about this a few times, so I know a little bit about it. But where in the scheme of this massive spread out piece did train horns
get in there?
Yeah.
Okay. It was like this with Inspire. I knew after trying Inspire, one of those distances was about 850 feet, right, from the sweet spot. It was pretty far, and you know, if the wind was blasting, it was hard to hear them. Sometimes you'd hear them well, and depending on the thermals and all the different things that are atmospheric conditions that bend sound waves around, it was cool, but it wasn't, on that aspect, but it wasn't going to be loud enough. So when I had this idea of expanding this concept and having the audience walk around the lake, I originally, of course, thought, brass won't do it. And besides, I'm not going to have brass players sit there and do some mechanical thing, over and over and over, so that the parallax is recognizable, right? You'd have to do the same pattern over and over and over. If you change the pattern, the audience wouldn't know what changed, right? So it has to be a pattern that doesn't change. What a horrible thing to do to musicians. Say, play as loud as you can, and this for about 7 minutes, and don't change. And it would be awful. So I thought, okay, this is going to be mechanical. So I thought, okay, what's the loudest instrument? Well, originally I thought of a pipe organ. So I contacted the Shantz Organ Company and asked him, I said, what is the loudest organ pipe available? And I told him what I was doing, and he says, that's just not going to work. You should look into diaphones. That's the loudest instrument known to the universe. So okay, I didn't know what a diaphone was. Mm-hmm. So I did a YouTube search on diaphones, and I found out, that's a whole series of instruments that are very crude and incredibly loud that are used in train horns and klaxons and warning horns everywhere. So I looked into the different train horn companies, and I started to learn a little bit more about how they're pitched, and started to pay attention to train signals, which I've always been fond of, actually, but exactly what kind of notes are available. Anyway, I contacted Nathan Airchime, told him, I wrote him an email about the idea, and they dug it. So they said, hey, we'll support you. And then I got back and said, well, I think I want 7 horns, and these are the pitches I want. So that's it.
And they had just an array of pitches, and are they named by pitch or are they named by frequency?
Actually, they do both.
Okay.
They have 2 different horn styles. In fact, that's one of the big dramas right now. In fact, I was out this morning making another video about this problem. They have 2 horns that are very popular. One is called the P series, and one's called the K series. They're different. So naturally, the different construction, they're going to have different responses. Now, they make different pitch sets in each one. So I originally thought, well, I'll have some P's and I'll have some K's, right? And I'll be fine. But it works out that the P horns, which are an older design, they're a little smaller, they're a different kind of manufacturing, they aren't as responsive. And so I got back to them and say, I've measured these, and the P horns are requiring nearly 100 milliseconds to speak, where the K horns are taking about 7 milliseconds to speak.
Pretty different.
Obviously, I could pre-time the P horns to speak early, but it's like, what a nuisance. So right. What I asked them to do, they asked well, tell us more about it. I sent them videos of the tests, and basically this what was happening. They said take out some parts of the horn, take them apart, pull out this ring, put it back together. It should be way more responsive. I did that this morning, and it hasn't. They're still late. They're quicker, but they're not very good. So in other words, there's still a lot of processes happening for this piece. I'm probably going to have to go with another set of pitches.
That's interesting. So the mechanical problems involved are I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but if I were putting this piece together, that would be a fun challenge to solve, I would think.
Well, yeah, it is actually. It's a lot of wrenches, and I had to figure out, well, how do I power these things?
Yeah, how are you driving them?
It's a canister of nitrogen gas that's as tall as me. It weighs 185 pounds, and they each horn requires one of these, so I have to buy dollies for each one, right? Because there's no way you can carry these suckers around.
Right.
And then you saw the picture real quick on the Kickstarter video. You could see the basic construction. That's not the half of it. I mean, the fun is, first I had to pipe all this stuff together, figure out basically the engineering of how to handle this, how to control it. I happen to have a brother. I have 5 brothers. My brother Randy is a salesman for Parker Pneumatics. Boy, was that handy. So I could just call him and say, Randy, this is what I'm doing. And he says, well, these solenoids are really expensive, but this is the best thing you could do. So I bought one, and wired it together. And right now I'm using a big push button to fire the horns. The real trick is the remote control part. So I have another brother who is as a well-recognized scientist in the firmware and IT world,
Cool.
and operating system design world, right? So that guy, my twin brother Kevin, said that he would design the radio control part, which, thank goodness, I don't have those skills to do that. So that's the real nuts and bolts part of this thing that's exciting. It's not done yet. So we're using basically what we call Zigbee boards. I don't know if you guys are familiar with some of the maker culture.
I know the name Zigbee, yeah.
Yeah.
Zigbee, Arduinos, all that kind of thing.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the true nerds in our audience may know them, but for anybody that doesn't, you might want to explain what that is. And the rest of you have homework to do, because you should know Zigbee.
It's great. Yeah. Basically, there are the technology of, let's call it sensors and controls, ways to create robots and make gadgetry is simpler now than it ever has been.
Mm-hmm. Cheaper.
Because, that's it. It's cheaper. And it's cheaper, and the code has been developed a lot more to make it more accessible and testable. So you don't need big R&D teams to come up with some of these, to actually test these ideas. These are things that are now cheap enough. You can go to Radio Shack and buy 3 or 4 different kinds of boards and kits and sensors that it's really up to the imagination what do you want these things to do. So with Kevin's expertise, we're just using those boards. The idea is this: I'm going to be playing a logic sequence. The logic sequence will also have audio tracks that will be fed to the UHF radios to provide clicks for the brass players. But it's at the same time it's going to be providing MIDI information on when the train horns are going to fire. And then we're going to go through Max, because Max is easily codable to talk to the Zigbee boards, XB boards.
Yeah.
The XB boards then will be basically running, two-way radio with a 6-mile range to the horns, and the horns will have be sending back information for handshakes and things, and to understand when they get data. So what this is good, what makes this, it makes it a lot more safe for the people on the boats that have the horns on board, because they'll be able to we'll have the LED light systems readiness, and we have a double safe to make sure that I'm going to ready all the horns from the hub on the shore where I'll be, and then each boat person needs to answer that with a go button, basically, and say, yeah, we're ready. That makes sure that they have all the ear protection on and all that, and they're ready. And then when it's all ready, it's like then they just sit there and let the thing play. There's an emergency button on the thing to stop if there's something happens on the boat. So
so we talked about how loud it is going to be to the audience on around the park, but it's going to be really dangerously loud for people without ear protection if they were standing on the boat next to the horn, right?
Stockhausen would be proud.
Well, they're 140 decibels.
That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
140 decibel horns each. Yeah, at a
But
meter.
it makes them great for the people that are far away, right? They have to be that loud so that the people that are far away can actually experience that distance effect.
Right. Yeah. There's a. I put another video on the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
That's it's about how loud will the horns be. I think it's the last video of the set of 4 underneath.
Okay. Yeah, I can show that.
Did you run that? That'll explain the decibel bit.
Yeah. So this is this yours or is this something you found?
No, I made all these.
Excellent. These are really great videos, by the
Yeah.
way.
Great production.
Super pro.
Will the horns be loud enough? Will they be too loud? The farthest distance between any of the horns and the audience's path is between the D5 horn and West 1 at about 1,269 feet. We find that the notes from the D5 horn should have a sound level of about 87 decibels across the lake. The shortest distance is that from the C4 horn to a point on the path 203 feet away. Since these horns are 7.1 decibels quieter from directly behind and 10 decibels quieter from the rear quarter, anyone at that particular spot on the path will experience about 93 decibels. Each swanboat captain will not only keep their horn located on the precise GPS position, but also make sure to point their boats as planned so that all the sounds from the horns will stay between 87 and 93 decibels. These are excellent levels for an outdoor concert.
So that's pretty loud, and I can say, having heard one of these horns live before, you demonstrated this to a group of people, and we were standing probably 30 to 50 feet away, and you pointed it pretty much straight away from us, and we had our fingers in our ears, and everybody still jumped at how loud it was. It was astonishing, which is pretty cool. I mean, it wasn't, I don't think, unsafe, but it was really loud.
Yeah, it's definitely not unsafe. It's just annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To be that loud. Keep in mind these aren't going to be like trains, like a train's going to be coming through the lake with a honk, honk. It's going to be very short.
Right, like we were just hearing in those demos.
Right, 125 milliseconds, is the length of the duration.
Another thing that you'd mentioned, I think, at that demo was that the pitch wasn't exactly what you'd expected because of that response delay. Is that something that you're still dealing with?
Very good. It really is the biggest worry.
Because when you hear the horn on a train, it doesn't go. It's not like a trombone player that just makes this nice fat. It kind of like lays it. Kind of. So
you're right. Well, so I'll give you an example. Every horn had an exact frequency it's tuned to, right?
Yeah.
But I don't let them ever get to that frequency because I don't want them to play full. I don't let them get to full volume, and I don't let them get to full pitch where they slide down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So all of them are a half step higher, and that's the trouble. So everything's actually shifted up a half step. My C is actually C sharp, the E is actually an F, right, and so on.
So it's like you're dealing with a transposing instrument.
Exactly.
I guess so, but this is the weird part. I mean, can you imagine how bad it will sound if my brass players play exactly to pitch, and these things aren't quite really a half step?
Yeah.
It's really awful.
I
So
wonder how
that's my biggest secret worry that wakes me up at 2 a.m. saying, "Oh my gosh,
is there
what?"
going to be a way for them to tune to the horns before the
There will be.
performance starts?
Yeah, there will be, and I could even provide that pitch on the from to the conductors. But a brass player, let's say that it's a quarter tone flat from the real pitch. Brass players are going to have a really hard time playing a quarter tone flat to make these big juicy chords that I have in mind to
Right.
work, because they're going to naturally fall into what's right.
Yeah.
And their horns are not going to be designed to be playing that far off 440. So I'm worried about that. Yes. So that'll just have. I'm not going to know until the day. So you gotta all come down and see. It'll either be a train wreck or it'll be awesome.
Man.
Musically speaking.
There's no reason to suspect that it couldn't be both.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm sure it'll be great though. The amount of effort that you put in, the amount of care that you put in is really just amazing, Keith. And reading all of this documentation just blows me away. How much effort you're putting into before you even really get to dig into writing notes and creating a musical composition. Like how much stuff you have to solve before you kind of the sub steps of step zero are amazing.
Well, it's fun. I think every composer loves these challenges, and I just
Sure.
happen to have a little bit of, I guess, mechanical ability and some science that I love. I just love the stuff. It's really fun. So now I'm
And
having
it
a
sounds
ball.
like you've got great help from people on solving the problems that are a little out of your hands. And it's great that you're getting such buy-in from the horn company.
Yeah.
And have you talked to any of the other players or any of the people that are going to be needed to get the space together for this stuff? What is their reaction?
Well, it just so happens that that's actually complex. I wish I had a camera following me around to make a documentary about what this kind of thing is. Not 2 weeks ago, I was told by the park that they wouldn't do it. They changed, that it's not going to happen, and I had to go convince them that what it was, and try to help them understand that this wasn't just, my me doing Beatles songs with train horns or something. That it was actually something that hadn't been done before, and it was good for the community, and they were mostly worried about the boats, which I was too. Those swan boats are really pretty little things, and they'll hold 4 people. They're pretty heavy, and they'll easily hold this horn. But he's the gentleman's name is Chris Wallace that is really responsible for that park, and he was really cool about it actually, and he's an old Navy guy, so it's like he immediately understood what we needed to see, and so we had to actually on the 28th of this month, I'm going to bring one of the horns down, and we're going to see how hard it is to actually get into the boat, and we're going to strap it down for safety with ratchet straps, and I don't know if I'll actually play it, but we have to go to that length to actually try it out. Then with my boat crew, I have 14 people on these boats. I've got to train them how to do all this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to do. I haven't found the GPS application yet to make this happen. That's another little thing I've got to do yet is sort out how to replace boats. So that was something I learned in Inspire. You can't do sight lines with this. This has to be really precise. And on the Inspire, 2 of the boats just were off like 600 feet, and it really messed up the counterpoint.
Yeah.
There was different reasons for that. I didn't give them enough instructions, and there was current issues, and there wasn't enough leg power to keep the boats in the right spot. And so there's lots to do yet.
It's amazing to me just how many parts of this project are like not regular considerations for something in a concert hall. Like,
you didn't learn about this stuff in
off.
conservatory.
Yeah.
Oh,
600 feet would put you out the building if you were on stage or something, right? It'd be amazing.
So tell us about the Kickstarter. What are you hoping for, and what are people going to get in exchange
Oh,
for supporting your project?
I'd never done a Kickstarter before, so that's been a learning curve. So I need $8,700. The big budget is 12 something. That's for the whole thing, and that I'm not getting any money out of it. It's paying for one person. It's paying for my brother to get him here from Arizona, and it's paying for a photographer. And beyond that, it's paying for giving gas money to the boat people, my boat crew. Because it's not much, and I think it's like $30 a piece. I can't remember. And then the musicians, I want to make sure that I pay them $100 a piece. It's still not exactly what they would get, but normally, but it's a weird gig, and hopefully they'll be glad to do something weird and fun. And Inspire, like I said, I only had like $25 for them. I thought I got to do better than that. I can't be asking too many favors to people. I don't like doing that. They deserve the respect, the musicians. And I need good musicians that can play out of tune exactly correctly.
Yeah.
And that's a pro level. I can't ask your average freshman in college, no matter how hot the guy is, he may not be used to tuning in an odd way to make the chords resonate correctly. Mm-hmm. So so it's like $3,000-4,000 of personnel, and then the horns themselves, I need another $5,500 or so. I got the budget in Kickstarter. I can't remember the exact numbers, but the horns are pretty expensive too. And but the beauty of the horns is that once I get these things going, I can keep using them. Mm-hmm. And I've already got another concert planned on the week after that, and it's going to be at night, and I'm going to surround a square in the middle of the city, and the traffic's going to be closed again. This is for the Creative City project, and that should be pretty cool. That'll be a whole different piece. You guys ever heard the Ligeti pieces for barrel organ?
No, actually.
No.
But it sounds like something I should check out.
It is the coolest. It's very inspirational. I'm going for that rapid, rhythmic awesomeness of. You'll have to hear it. And I think
you know what? I think I absolutely have, because it was on an album that I had gotten with the Ligeti piano etudes.
Yeah, I remember hearing it too.
I've definitely heard that. Now that you describe it, I can hear it in my head.
Yeah. Well, it's worth looking up. Every composer that hasn't heard him. If you grew up in the 60s and 70s like I did, you'll understand where Keith Emerson from Memphis Lake and Palmer got a lot of his ideas.
Nice.
It's running 16ths, and it's very super energetic and syncopated and fun. And what it does a good job of is taking advantage of the how much impact there is from one note at a time to two. Just playing like an open fifth. If you have a da 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 pop, and then you have a one note that is now has maybe a fifth under it, it's such a different sound. It's a really minimal. It's not minimalism. It's a really effective way of using few notes available, and it runs into the psychology of how we hear things and how you sort of when you create a piece, you're sort of laying out the rubric in the early part of the piece of what the dimensions, what the sound world is of your piece. And if you start with something simple like that and only one note at a time, when you hear two or three, it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're dealing with loud instruments like a barrel organ or like these train horns, it's going to have a visceral, physical effect because the energy is going to be much greater. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we'll see how that piece comes. Again, I have to wait to compose the darn thing till I get my horns situated.
It's very exciting, and we're really glad that you came on to tell us about it. We would encourage everybody to check out the project on Kickstarter and please back it because I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yes, please back it. And if for the rewards are pretty cool, you need to check them out. But at a certain level, you get the ability to play the distance organ, the quote loudest instrument in the world. So if I had $1,000 on me, I'd be playing me some distance organ.
Yeah. Do you guys think it is the loudest instrument in the world? I have 7 at 140 decibels.
Well, see, I was thinking about that. It depends on what you want to call a musical instrument, because you could call a stack of TNT an instrument if you wanted to, right?
The Earth itself.
You got me.
Which brings up a point. I'm wondering what your like part of the rewards packages is mentions a new piece using the distance organ. So I'm 100% behind that. That I wouldn't want to do all this work to come up with this thing and then only use it once.
Right.
Right.
So do you have anything planned for the future already, like future plans for this instrument or future physical situations you'd like to exploit in some way?
Well, yes. Thank you for asking. Besides the concert after, if you've ever driven out west and you get to these huge vistas of mountains where there's not a person in sight from ever, and you see these mountains that are 20 miles away, I want to hear them from the mountains from a distance.
Woo!
And also the idea of wouldn't it be amazing to hear these things falling out of an airplane and playing and just hearing what it would sound like. And the more I've been thinking about that, I'm thinking about how could that actually happen. And I'm thinking about having some aerodynamics planned on them so that they'd perhaps spin. You have this giant Leslie flying down from the sky. I just want to hear it. It's just curiosity more than anything. And
you need to figure out some way to voice your desire to make these pieces happen and convince the Mythbusters that they need to become involved somehow. Because when you start talking about figuring out how to make an air horn play when it's being dropped out of an airplane, I mean, that sounds like those guys.
Reality TV, definitely. Yeah.
Don't you
Or
think,
get Red Bull to sponsor it, like the guy jumping out of the outer space balloon.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Red Bull as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a music festival now. This could totally be part of a Red Bull music festival.
And they actually push, strange experimental music, stuff that comes at the strange and experimental from the sort of pop music side, but it gets pretty strange and pretty experimental no matter where it's coming from.
And I think the added extreme danger part of it,
Yeah.
I think, would appeal to them as well.
Right.
That's the whole.
great idea.
I mean, I love the idea. I love combining it with the idea of danger music.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But definitely we'll be watching this, and I will be backing shortly after the show comes down. So there's my disclosure of a conflict of interest. Not only is Keith a friend of mine, but I'm totally going to back this project because I totally want to hear it happen.
Oh, yeah.
So Keith, do you have anything else that you want to plug real quick before we move into some other topics briefly?
No, I'm really appreciate you letting us you show this to everybody. It means a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
we're happy to do it because it's like we said, we're pretty excited about the idea of the project, as I think you can tell.
Yeah.
We talked last week about an article in New Music Box by our friend Andy Lee, great pianist, recorded Dennis Johnson's November that we talked to him about earlier, I guess maybe even last year, and then was responded to by another friend of ours, Alex Shapiro, in the pages of New Music Box, on the idea of entrepreneurship. And Andy's concern was that we are beginning to focus too much on the business side of what we do in contemporary arts, and that is somehow distracting us from making the best art that we can make. Alex was kind of contradicting that, and we talked about it last week. Andy, as we said, was writing a 4-part series, and the second part was published this week. And so we did want to address that. Sam, you had some strong feelings about this one. That a lot of it is about branding and about presenting the business to our audience.
Well, to me, the issue that keeps coming up in both of the articles so far is that he's sort of taking a straight up, according to Hoyle, like in your business textbook definition for all these things and slapping them on top of music and then saying how he doesn't think that's a good thing.
But like a business textbook that was published in the 80s or 90s before the internet was a thing.
Right.
Before e-commerce existed and before social media existed. And he talks about the way people use social media, and he complains about people just using it to get people to buy their stuff. And that's how people that suck at social media use social media. And I think I'm totally okay with people complaining about companies that have douchey social media accounts. Like that's, I think, a worthwhile thing to do every once in a while. But I think we all pretty much understand now that social media is not great at connecting people with brands. It's great at connecting people with other people.
Well, he makes that point.
And that's the way people should be doing it. And that's exactly what he's saying. And I don't think anybody would argue with that.
Right.
And I don't think anybody is I think it's a little, I guess what I'm saying is a little bit of a straw man to say that these things that people are doing in social media are dumb. And I'm like, yeah, but when we talk about entrepreneurship, that's not the things that we're talking about. We're not talking. We're talking about the good social media use, which is what Andy does. Andy's a great follow on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, follow Andy Lee, and read the things that he writes on I Care If You Listen, and also on New Music Box now, because he's a very thoughtful guy. And that is a part of his brand now, right? I don't think we could say that the things that he writes on Twitter or I Care or New Music Box are not a branding effort from him, whether he wants it to be or not. Like that's part of his business of selling awesome piano records.
Well, he expresses concern that if you work hard to brand yourself as an artist, that you will then become stuck in your brand, and then you'll suffer like the Dave Matthews Band disease, where you make Crash and everybody loves it and it's played for 3 years nonstop on the radio, and then your next album, because you dare to evolve and try something new, everybody hates it.
Yeah. Right.
Right. But I don't think that's something that is unique to our new emphasis in the internet space and on college campuses now in music schools around the country and around the world, on that new emphasis on entrepreneurship. I don't think that problem that he is describing is a new one, right?
No.
When Stravinsky tried a new thing, people were like, whoa, what is this? This is not Stravinsky that I know and love. Like, these are not novel, and they're not specific to the idea of entrepreneurship.
I would argue that all the infrastructural tools that modern communication technology, social media being one of those things, gives us is the ability to brand ourselves and to network that brand. But it also, you can control the message a lot better because you are in control of, you can be in control of the messaging instead of relying on someone whose job it is to control the message. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you can talk to the people that love your stuff, and you can say, hey, we did that thing, and now we're doing this other thing, because we need to be artistically fulfilled. And if you still want to listen to the other thing, you don't have to listen to the new thing.
Yeah,
and you can have that conversation.
My beef with Andy in this and the last piece, and a lot of people when they talk about social media, is I think everyone would agree that as a composer, as an example, you need to network with people and know people. And a lot of what you do in your career is who you know and the opportunities that you get from those people, and you're always looking to network with people that you like, that you respect, and that can help you, and that you can provide reciprocity to, or altruistically help them, because that's the way a lot of stuff happens, in the music business, especially for composers.
Mm-hmm.
And people always want to extract social media out of that as if it's something that exists outside of your normal, like, networking with people and trying to forward yourself as a composer. I mean, that's like, to me, that's like extracting the written word, you know, and saying, because I wrote a letter to somebody, it's totally different than talking to them on the phone, and we need to have a conversation about how to control my letter writing and how I use letter writing and all this kind of stuff. I think people need to think of it more in terms of it's all the same thing. You're networking with people, you're making connections. Social media is one of the ways you do that. And in that vein, we should be educating undergraduates to be a lot smarter about the internet and networking and how to control their brand and that kind of thing. So I think that a lot of the stuff he's complaining about and harping on music schools spending time trying to educate their students on, I think general undergraduate education should be taking care of more of those things. And I think that would take care of a lot of it.
Sure. And we also, we should point out, got an email from Antonio Celaya, who listens to the show. Thank you, Antonio, for getting in touch, about the idea that we are, that this support from, direct support from audiences may have an effect on the kind of music that people make. And his argument seems to be, is a quote from his email: the uber serialists who smooched the foundation's committees for grants were engaged in a form of institutionalized entrepreneurship. Their music was none too appealing, but is significantly different from what Ice Ensemble or Alarmal Sound do. And I would say, yes, it is. And I think it's a little bit of a straw man to say that the kinds of music that we make historically was always wasn't something that needed institutional support before. Like, there have always been arts patrons, and sure, there have been examples of populist composers. This is especially true of opera and ballet, but there are plenty of composers throughout history that needed the support of specific individuals or specific organizations that didn't then need to rely on ticket sales to make their next production the way that people do today. What did you think when you read that, Sam?
I'm pretty much down with what you said.
So if anybody else would like to chime in on this, you are welcome to, panel.
I
all right,
you guys are covering this pretty well.
All right, that's fine. If you, listening or hearing the sound of my voice, would like to contribute to this discussion, you can send us an email, as Antonio did. You can also connect with us on Facebook or Twitter, or leave a comment on our site, soundnotion.tv. You can also leave a comment on the YouTube video of this event, which will be up. Again, links to all that stuff and all the things that we talked about with Keith and these articles that we've been talking about here at the end of the show. soundnotion.tv/SN for all of those links. And we'll also, Keith, where can people catch up with you on the web?
Keith Flay, KEITHLAY.com.
Excellent, and we will have links to that as well as to these awesome videos that he's put together and the Kickstarter project, which you should definitely support. You can subscribe to this show and all our shows at soundnotion.tv in the iTunes store. Keith mentioned Max that is going to be used in this performance, and I should plug this great interview that we recorded this week that Nate and our friend Ben did on our electroacoustic music show Patch In with the creator of Max, Miller S. Puckett.
Oh my God!
That was me the whole time we were talking with him.
He kept it inside really well, though, I want to say. He
Yeah.
did a really good job of not going total fanboy on Miller Puckett. But Miller was very generous with his time. He had a great conversation about the history of Max and Pure Data and where he sees these things headed. That'll be up on the site today, or not, maybe not today, but sometime in the next couple of days. SoundNotion.tv/PI. But all of our shows at SoundNotion are in the iTunes store and many other aggregated podcast location things. So be sure to subscribe and catch all of them as they go up. Downloaded auto-magically directly to your device, wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. You can support this show using the Amazon affiliate link on our site. If you're buying regular stuff on Amazon, if you just find it through the little search box on the right side of our site, that's really helpful to us. We get a little commission. It doesn't cost you anything. Say what?
Flat screen TVs.
Yeah, if you're buying a flat screen TV, a $4,000 SLR camera, a car, used car, maybe, anything like that.
Or like 7 train horns or anything.
Or, yeah. If you need to buy 180-pound nitrogen tanks on Amazon, just get it through our link, and that'll be really helpful. You can also use the donation links on our site too if you're feeling generous in that way as well. SoundNotion's introduction that you heard earlier includes music by Patrick Gullo. Sam would like to say something.
You cut me off. We have to say goodbye to Licia Albanese, I think is her name.
Okay.
Italian-born soprano who was very popular in the middle of the 20th century, and she passed away this week at 105.
Indeed.
Wow.
So very, very influential soprano, and you should definitely check out some of the stuff that's being written about her this week. Mm-hmm. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gullo, and, well, I would say video by Tyler Lepp. Tyler made this great video for us, then what you don't use anymore. Thanks anyway, Tyler. But it includes music by Patrick Gullo, and we will see you back next week. Thank you so much for watching or listening. All right.
Sweet sauce.
That was fun. Thank you for your time, Keith.
Oh, you guys, this is a ball. I really had fun. So I wish I could have contributed a little more, but I felt I talked